Recording in progress.
Good evening. It is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. This is the City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. All members of the council are present. We're also joined by the mayor, various members of staff, and we'll just go ahead and jump right into it tonight. First discussion topic is on landlord and tenant arrangements for billing with utilities. This is one that the council had previously expressed a desire in finding a little bit more information on. And we have, well, looks like Tyler and Denise have some info for us. So, all yours. Yeah, it's the button on the right. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you had a meeting in December and discussed this and wanted some information, and so thanks for letting me come tonight. Glad I could have something put together for March, so here we are. Let's see, so if I push this, does it go on? There it is. Okay, so I wanted to start out addressing how are we currently handling rental properties in West Jordan, right? Right now, this is the way we're handling it. We have a tenant courtesy billing request. A landlord or property owner would fill this out and request that their tenant receive a copy of the bill in their name. So the tenant can actually use this utility bill. It does come in their name. It's got their name printed on it and everything. They can use this to provide proof of address or apply for financial assistance, things like that if they need to. It is essentially the same thing as a landlord agreement seen in other cities. We just call ours a tenant courtesy billing request. But it makes sure that the tenant gets a copy of the bill in their name. All right, so who's actually available to get one of these? Only single-family home rentals are eligible to get one of these, a copy of the bill in their name, right? HOAs, townhomes, apartments, none of those actually have individual utility accounts. Some of them we don't even service with utilities, but others it's just a group, right, utility account, so we can't provide anything else. And how many tenant courtesy billing requests, how many tenants do we currently have? The honest truth is we really don't know how many single-family homes are being rented. We know we send out less than 700 copies each month, but we don't really know how many there are in the city. There's likely more than what we know about. And a lot of these billing requests are even going to commercial properties, things like that. So not all of them are necessarily for renters, and some are for property management, things like that. All right, so the pros and cons of the way we're currently doing things. Pro, number one, is the tenant does receive a bill with their name on it, right? So instead of a landlord having to tape a bill to the door like I used to get when I lived in Orem and say split this between the top and bottom, the bill comes in the tenant's name. They feel some sense of ownership over that, and it's, they know that they need to pay that if that's their agreement with the landlord. We don't require any sort of a deposit at all for new utility accounts. People move in, they fill out their application online, and that's it. We don't take any sort of payment at the time that they sign up for service, which is great for our customers. Because our landlords know that, and it says on that tenant courtesy or that tenant request, that it states that the landlords are responsible for the bill even though it's coming in the renter's name. Property owners take responsibility for those properties, and so if there's repairs or anything, they know they're ultimately responsible for any high water bills they get, and so we see a lot of homeowners being very responsible in fixing leaks and things like that. We have very few utility write-offs. Other cities have much higher utility write-offs than we do. In fact, we write off very, very little, and it's kind of on a case-by-case basis even. We really don't write off any utility debt. We're able to collect most of it, and the stuff that's completely uncollectible, it's generally because somebody has passed away and there's no way we can, and a title check hasn't covered the rest, right? And there's just no way we're going to be able to get that. So it's a very small amount that we actually write off. And because of that, we have a very high collection rate on delinquent balances. Right now, we currently use kind of 3 tools for delinquent balances. The first one is utility disconnection. After 3 months or after 3 bills, a utility is disconnected, and then that prompts payment most of the time. If that doesn't work, right now we're currently sending delinquent balances to the state, and we can actually collect on state income tax refunds. So the people get a letter and it says, hey, if you don't pay your delinquent balance, the state's going to garnish your income tax return, your state income tax return, and send it to us. That tool's going away next year. We won't be able to use it in the future, but it's working this year, and it has worked for the past few years we've used it. And then finally, if they still don't pay, then we'll put a property tax certification on the property, and then they just pay it as a part of their property tax bill in October. We collected about $35,000 in state income tax refunds and about $40,000 in property tax certifications this last year. Works really well.
Tyler, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Is there ever a point that, and Paul knows where I'm going with this one, so he'll laugh. Is there ever a point in time where where we can't collect with the property tax that we actually go to court, file a judgment, and put a formal lien on the property?
No, we don't ever do that. From what I've been told, we can't lien the property, but we can send them to collections. So really, if those 3 tools don't work, at that point, the account goes to collections, and a collection agency tries it.
Paul?
So you're right, you can't lien the property just for the failure to pay. If you want to put an actual lien on the property, you would have to do, as Councilmember Green stated, you'd have to go to court and get a judgment. And once you have the judgment from the court, then you could then file that judgment as a lien on the property. But you can't do it without going to court and doing the lawsuit. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons of how much money is it, how much is it time and effort is it going to take to, to get the judgment, and is it worth it to go through that process? Are we ever going to be able to collect, by doing that? But
that's right. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. No, we have never done that,
but it is a tool. It is an arrow in your quiver if we needed it.
It could be, but yeah, the time and effort to really get a judgment like that is probably cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it just depends on how much money's owed.
Exactly, and utility bills, they generally, because we shut off after 3 months, typically they don't get too high. The only exception would be some sort of huge, giant leak, and then somebody skips town, leaves the country or something.
Okay.
So it just doesn't usually happen. It's not usually worth it. So a couple cons to our current method is that a tenant is unable to reserve a dumpster. And you'll see an asterisk next to that, and that's because I have a potential solution on our next slide. Tenant is unable to make service changes because they are not the ones that are ultimately responsible for the bill. We don't allow them to request extra dumpsters or extra garbage cans, things like that. And right now they're unable to pay online, which is a big headache for our customer service staff, but we have another solution for that as well. And I think I heard the question live from over here, and the only reason that they can't at the moment is because we don't have a method for them to do so online. They would have to have a different customer number, and so it's a little different, and online they can't find that customer number. It's not in the system, so we're working on that. I'll present a solution for you next. Yeah, right. So, couple solutions. First of all, with the dumpster reservation, right?
Question from,
Yeah, I'm a little confused because I'm in an HOA townhome, have a utility bill, a courtesy one, and I pay online. And I rent. Yeah, I rent
So-
in a townhome, in an HOA. I get the courtesy utility bill, and I'm able to pay it online. So I was like looking at this, I'm like, that doesn't sound right for me.
Then that wouldn't apply to every single townhome in the city. Apartments, we absolutely don't.
Yeah, I
work
was
with
just a little confused when I
a
saw
lot of,
that.
A lot of HOAs, the HOA has a utility
Yeah.
account, not each of an individual home. There are some where that is the case, and if the property owner or whatever has
Mhm.
given you, you know, the bill and said, "Hey, pay this," then you can
Yeah, I
absolutely
get the
do that.
courtesy one in my name and in the email, and I clicked online and I pay it.
Perfect.
So I was just a little confused. I was like, I want to make sure it's accurate because.
Generally, the courtesy copies have a different customer number than the owner, and so they're unable to pay online. It won't look up it won't find that customer number in the system, and that's the part that we're working on fixing.
But if the owner gave the renter the customer number, they'd be able to pay online using the customer number.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I get the courtesy in the mail and via email, and so I'm able to click on the email link and pay.
Yeah, and if you're registered in the system, once you're in, right? So, landlords can go on and they can actually request separate accounts for their tenants, right? So they can have a guest account or whatever, or they can even give them owner access and they can do whatever they want, sign up for auto pay and all those things. It really just depends on the landlord. So it sounds like you're able to do all those things, and that's great. I'm glad. Okay, so possible solutions for the dumpster reservation. During the months of April 1st to October 31st, we would actually really like for tenants to be able to reserve dumpsters. They would make that reservation in person at Public Works. At that time, when they come in to reserve the dumpster, they just pay their reservation fee right there in person. We can place a dumpster in the street, and they don't need to go through the property owner. This checks a couple boxes. It checks legal's box because they're putting that dumpster in the street. We don't need homeowner permission to put it in a public right-of-way, right? We just need to make sure that there's enough space in the street to be able to put the dumpster there, and we can put it right there. If they do want to put it in the street, we need homeowner permission still, right? But they can do this. Any tenant can do this. They don't need to go through their landlord at all. And this requires just very little tweaking of our current system. It's a really easy solution.
so what happens if the tenant gets a dumpster in April and then they move out in May, and then the homeowner goes to get a dumpster for renovations in July?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to keep track of all of that on the utility account. I think if that did happen, we would probably still give them the $50 rate and let them have that. But we want to be really careful because we don't want that to be abused.
So
I
you'll
guess
do,
it's a
sorry.
similar question as if somebody owns a home, they sell it they get a dumpster in April, sell it, new homeowner comes in, they get another
Right.
dumpster August.
Yeah,
You're doing it more by person versus property in that case.
we're going to have to keep track of that, though. We are going to be tracking that on the utility account, making notes. What we don't want to have happen is to have the property owner requested in January, their renter in February, their new renter in April, even at the property owner's request, the renter's doing it. We don't think honestly, we don't get that many tenants that want to rent dumpsters. I've spoken with Shay out at Public Works, and she said that, through this whole dumpster rental program, she's had maybe a handful of tenants that have come in or called her and wanted a dumpster. So we don't anticipate it being utilized a lot, not like our dumpster program for homeowners, but it will get used. And so we're going to be keeping track of that on the utility account. If we see an abuse, then we're going to have to charge the higher amount.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Currently, you have to put it in your driveway if you're a homeowner.
No, you can put it in the street.
Okay. I haven't gotten a dumpster for quite a while, but the
Right.
last time I was told I had to put it in so it can go in the street.
It can go in the street as long as there's space for it. Now, if somebody requests a dumpster and it's not going to fit in the
Yeah,
street,
it's gonna block traffic off. Yeah.
it's going to block traffic.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to put one there. They're going to have to speak to their homeowner.
And there's a lot of driveways that aren't long enough for the dumpsters.
That too.
Never mind.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, really good questions.
You mean we need longer than 20-foot driveways?
Nobody in Utah owns a truck. I mean, come on.
Any other questions before I go on? Okay, thanks a lot. Good questions, you guys.
Hey, so I'm gonna ask the question, Brian, how long is the dumpster? Do you have any idea?
Roughly probably 20 feet, 17 feet, something like that.
I thought it was like 18 feet, something, yeah.
The dimensions are online. They're big. They're really big.
Is there an option for sizes, or is it just, you just get the, okay.
And it's required to go in your driveway in the winter months.
Yeah.
Because keep them off the road.
Which is why we can only do this April 1st through October 31st. We're limited on the dates because winter we have to put it in the driveway to keep it off the road for snow removal. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for your clarification, Brian. Next is online payments. Our online payment provider, Invoice Cloud, has the option right now. We're going to likely move forward and set up an option to pay online as a guest, right? So you don't have to match your account number, customer number with something already in the system. That way anybody can make a payment in any amount as long as they reference a utility account, give us a service address, things like that, and then we can go through and apply those. There's a minimal fee to do this, probably $25 to $50 a month, depending on how many transactions there are.
Is that for the full city or per account?
No, for the full city. If we would set up likely what's called a cloud store, just a separate online portal, right? Hosted by the same people, but there is a separate fee for that. And depending on how many transactions are in there, the fee would be between 25 and 50 a month. Well, okay, thank you very much.
I was gonna say,
wasn't formally requesting, I was willing to cover that, but.
I don't know if we can afford that. In a
What
60
percentage of a property tax rate increase would that, never mind.
Luckily, I don't think you'll need to go to your constituents for that at all.
Brian will cover.
All right, so then let's talk about what would it cost to create a tenant independent account, right? So with that, we would likely need a part-time utility clerk. We currently have 3 utility clerks that manage just under 30,000 utility accounts for the entire city. It's a lot of work. And so to manage the additional paperwork of new signups and new accounts, opening, closing, things like that, as well as following up with payments and collections and all that stuff, we'd probably need at least a part-time utility account. That's what I request, and that's about $35,000. Next, we only have 2 meter readers.
Wait, Tyler, 35,000 for, are they part-time so they don't get any benefits? Is
Correct.
that why? Okay.
Yep. I think full-time would probably be too much, and so part-time is what we need, but my ladies, the 3 utility clerks right now are already pretty busy. And
How many accounts did you say?
we have about 28,000
Okay.
utility
I would
accounts.
think more, but okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah, way more apartments and living spaces, but yeah, about 28,000 utility accounts. And they manage that. And even with all those utility accounts and all the meters we have, we only have 2 meter readers at the moment. And so we would need at least a part-time meter reader to go out and help us with those accounts. Get final reads and new reads for those rental accounts, things like that.
I
You have a
thought
question?
sorry, go for it.
Are we not reading electronically? We still have to send a physical person out?
That was my question with, how much did we spend on that AMI system, the tower, do we put a tower in a park thing?
Maybe this
So is that
question is
not
better
working?
answered by someone else and they'll need to come to the microphone.
Does anybody else want to?
Well,
I
like one
can
of
try
you
to
over
answer it.
there.
I'm staring at Brian Clegg, but Greg, Mr. Davenport, if you want to, you can use this other mic.
There's 2 seats there.
He doesn't want to sit down. He wants to just.
We're
I
grilling
didn't
you
warn
guys.
Greg he'd be coming up here at all.
Sorry, you do need to push that.
Oh, the one right.
I think that, yes, the new AMI system, new meters that are put in today would read electronically. That's the plan. The difficult part with this would be if you're not already set up to have an individual bill, like Pamela's. Obviously, her HOA is set up so they get an individual bill. Some HOAs do have individual meters per unit. Even if we wanted to, they'd be in a situation where they'd be master metered. So even to put in they'd have to put in new meters. There'd be a lot more than just that
Yeah.
required to actually service a apartment complex or an HOA that's on a master meter with individual meters. So the cost would actually probably be a whole lot higher than that, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
even though we're going to electronically read meters, we need to know that there's still a lot of things that happen with meters every month. And so they may not be readers anymore, but they may be meter technicians. So they would fix meters that aren't reading correctly, whether their antenna's broken or whether the
But-
lid has a problem or the meter has a problem. They also are involved in turn-offs and turn-ons. So one of the things that would change in this situation is there would, with the additional meters, there would be additional requests for turn-offs and turn-ons. Is that correct?
But
There
are
would
we
be.
talking extra meters? I thought we were just talking about allowing a tenant in an existing property with an existing meter. So that's my question. Why with an existing property with an existing meter, do we have to have a part-time meter reader?
It would depend, right, if they have an individual meter or if they're a part of a big group,
Okay,
right?
so
if
my
they're
question is just
an
if
individual
it's a
meter, this would
home,
be an
single-family home, they already have a meter, why would we?
I think Tyler can answer that, but I'll bet.
Can we,
I'll
I
bet
just
we
wanna
already
know,
do that.
can we read that electronically? Okay, we can, okay.
Your mic's off, Tyler.
Okay. Yes, we can read that. For those that are set up with it, yes, we would be able to go in and get a read, hopefully, off of that meter. The issue we do run into, of course, is we would need it to read in the right timeline as well, right? So if we know somebody's moving out and we need to make sure we get a read within the time frame that we need the read for. We can't use a read that's 3 weeks old for somebody. The towers are great and things, and they're doing well. We still don't always get a read exactly when we need it. And that's where some of these manual reads.
And let me explain something too. There's two things with the read system. With the tower system, it's always communicating information to the tower, but it's taking that also from that information, then putting it into Munis and those kind of things that are different. So, and even when we have tower reads, they have to specifically create a file, send that file from Munis to the tower system and say, this is the data that I want, and pull it off specifically. In this situation, you would have to create a brand new file for each individual, whatever it is, and so that's the extra time I think that you're.
So
That
I'm
is part of
super
it, yeah.
happy to hear that humans are still needed over computers.
Computers are great, but we still need humans to run them and maintain them.
So,
that's for sure.
Greg,
As of
before
today.
you run away,
Today.
so I'm gonna ask, so we're not 100% AMI yet, and I know that we were running into a meter shortage. Are we still in that same meter shortage, and what's the anticipation of getting all the water meters on AMI?
So, many cities adopted an approach where they eased into the AMI system, and we took it all at once. We're still getting all the bugs out of the tower read system. So we're dealing with meters that could be read by the tower, but are 7, 8 years old, and we're having to go to those meters and we're having to make sure their antenna is correct and make sure that there's still things we are doing to put everybody there. We're getting a lot closer than we've ever been to having as many on as we can. We still, let me back up. Right now, we have 24,000 meters. I'm going to say 16,000, 17,000 of those are read by the tower system all the time. The others are not. And so they're either read by a technician who has to go and read it, or they are read through a radio system, if that makes sense. And it will take our city the same way, time to get those old meters, because our meter typically lasts 20 years. And the technology we're talking about, this tower read system, is 6 years old, something like that. It takes time to do all that. And instead of just change every meter out, we're trying to do it so that every meter connects and then we're successful. So we're still in our implementation phase with those meters.
But man, it's great. My utility billing techs love it when they get a phone call from somebody and they can just pull up their usage and it's right there. It's wonderful. So we're really glad we have it.
I like it when I can pull up my phone and see my usage.
Yeah. It's really cool. We look forward to the day where we roll that out citywide, but we want to make sure we're ready for it before we do that. And then finally, the final cost would be, we know that we are going to have additional write-offs. I told you earlier we collected about 35,000 from state income taxes. We collected about 40,000 from property taxes for delinquent accounts. I would say for a starting place, I'd want to at least put in 50,000 for potential utility write-offs, just to make sure we have some cushion and make sure that we're planning for some additional write-offs. So that would come to a total cost of about 120,000 a year that we'd be looking at. All right, so let's talk about some pros and cons of tenant independent accounts. Pros, right? The tenant establishes their relationship with the city directly, not through their landlord. There's privacy from their landlord knowing their utility consumption. That might be important to some people. And they have the ability to make utility service changes, right? They can request that extra garbage can or get rid of one or what have you. Okay. Some cons, the property owner is no longer responsible for those balances, which may result in a delayed landlord response for water leaks because they're not financially liable for them. They're not paying for the water that's used, but they're certainly going to probably bear some of the expense of the repairs. We may see some delayed fixes and some leaks that are ongoing. We would have to require deposits because we don't shut off for after the third bill. That's 3 months, and our utility bills are typically $100 plus. We would want a deposit of at least $350 to hopefully cover us in the case that somebody skips out and doesn't pay their bill. We know we would have higher utility write-offs on some of those uncollectible balances. And there would be additional staff time to create, close accounts, collect meter reads, things like that. We would also still need owner approval to put a dumpster on the property in the driveway. So even though it's the tenant's utility account, it's still the homeowner's home. And we would need their permission to enter the property and get a waiver. We could still put it on the street, yes, and we can currently do that. Excuse me. All right, so I wanted to present to you a list of other cities and kind of what's going on.
Real quick,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack, did you have a question?
Thank you. Is there a deposit requirement for a homeowner now? It's been 25 years since I established mine. So,
No, there's no deposit requirement
so
currently.
why would that be a requirement to have the 350? I know you're saying potentially because the tenant might move, but that's just making a statement that's not necessarily a fact there, correct? That's just something that, I mean, who's saying that that's a requirement? We would be needing to say that's a requirement, right? As city council?
Well, I would recommend that we would put a deposit in place in that case. It would likely be, we could either decide to do it for everybody in the city or just for tenant accounts. That's pretty common that cities will charge a different deposit rate for homeowner versus a renter, right? That's pretty common. And so we could decide to do something similar, but whatever that deposit ends up being and for whoever it's for, I would recommend it be at least $350 to cover us for 3 months of utilities. If for whatever reason, the renter specifically would get service, not pay for their services, and then after not paying for 3 months, they move out and we can't collect on the balance.
Point taken and respected. To me, that's still treating a tenant differently than a property owner.
And in that case, if that's the way we feel, we can certainly change how
But
we
the
implement
difference
that
is a
deposit.
property owner, you can go after their property. You can go after you have other remedies to go after that money, which we do use. With a tenant, you don't. So I think that's the difference.
Sure, understood. I guess it just depends on what our ultimate goal here is.
And then I'm going to go a different direction because if we are collecting a deposit, would we still see that $50,000 expense? Wouldn't they?
Maybe not. We may be able to
theoretically
reduce that.
equalize. Yeah.
I would say I would want that 50,000 as a buffer, right? And then after a couple of years of data and we can see how it shakes out, then maybe we can reduce that.
Or even if the tenant skips out, we have it on file for the owners to be responsible for what the tenant doesn't pay.
Not if the
Well,
tenant is solely responsible.
Correct.
Under the current system,
Mm-hmm.
the landlord could be responsible, but if we make it so that it's a tenant independent account, property owner is no longer responsible and we can't collect. So we would be left to the wind that if the renter, if the renter didn't pay the bill, and left, property owners got no liability, and we would be stuck holding the bag with the amount that's unpaid, and that could be more than what's on the deposit, which is the 50K. Paul, you were going to make a comment?
That was part of the comment as well. And as far as Councilmember Pack's question, it is because it's not based on anything with that individual person. It's based on the ownership of a property that the city could then possibly collect against. So there wouldn't be any legal ramifications of treating those two accounts differently. It's not based because of anything related to the individual person. It's just based on the property itself. So there wouldn't be a legal reason why we couldn't require a deposit from a tenant who doesn't own a property and not require that from a homeowner that owns the property.
Great, thank you. I think it still comes back to we as a council could identify what the ultimate goal of this strategy might be. Is it to try to treat tenants and property owners equitably, or is it to recoup costs? I mean, ultimately, both would be nice. We already have the good landlord program in place. Ideally, if there is a rental, there'd be an incentive in place to be a landlord that's certified through the American Apartment Association as a good landlord, to do those background checks to ensure quality tenants are in the properties. So I think there'd be other remedies that could be put into place besides just making it an economic deposit, which could prohibit tenants from doing this very thing, because that could be a major consideration why they are renting, especially with today's house prices.
So
money could be an
so
issue.
let me ask you this question. What would be the economic way to guarantee that we had payment and not leave the rest of the city's utility users holding the bag if a renter skipped?
Who is that question directed to?
You?
It comes back to what are we ultimately trying to do? That's my question. Are we focusing solely on money, or are we focusing on trying to treat tenants and landlords equitably? I'm not saying I have the answer to that question. I'm just posing the question.
It's very common practice for cities to collect utility deposits. Very common practice, and it's pretty common for the deposit amounts to be different based on homeowner or tenant. That's not uncommon to see. But we also need to keep in mind that we are only talking about we're not talking about tenants in every single situation in the city. We're really only talking about tenants that are renting single-family homes in West Jordan, right?
Yeah,
Because we're not even worried about ones that
I'm
wouldn't
wondering
pay
if there isn't
individually.
a remedy of some kind here between the tenant and the landlord. Leave the landlord on the hook from the city, but then there's a landlord-tenant requirement in the situation where a landlord does want to assign the tenant the utilities for whatever reason. The landlord then also says, okay, either tenant, you're on the hook for a deposit, or I will pay the deposit and go after the tenant to recoup that deposit if it ends up being taken from me. So I wonder if there's not another avenue for redress here, is if it came down to that.
So,
I'm trying to throw some thoughts out there.
so is the whole point of this is to get them to be able to get dumpsters? Is that the point of this? No, you also want them to
I think
have.
it started that way.
So what is this item? I mean, because if it's just to get them to get dumpsters, I like what you've suggested a few slides prior.
So, what I'd like to do, I'd like to give Tyler a chance to proceed to the end, and then we'll ask the question. Are there 4 people that are happy with where things are at today? Are there 4 people that would like to pursue a change in course? And yeah.
Okay. Thanks everybody for your comments. I really appreciate it. So on the slide in front of you, you can see kind of what other cities are doing versus in this situation. We have those that the property owner is responsible for the bill, and those are West Jordan, Sandy, South Jordan, Orem, Riverton, South Valley Sewer, Granger Hunter, South Ogden, Nephi, and Ivins. In the Tenant independent accounts, we have one more organization, right? That's one more than the number in the property owner column. You can see there's an asterisk next to Murray. They actually do have it they require it in the homeowner's name if it's a stormwater only account, and that's because their stormwater is lienable and they use that as a collection method. So for those accounts, they require it in the homeowner's name so that they can collect on it. Provo, I think, is really interesting because it depends on the terms of the rental agreement, which is interesting because that to me says that they're allowing whatever property management or whatever apartment to kind of dictate how they do that. But it's a college town, so it's going to be different. And so if the rental agreement requires the tenants to have utilities in their name, then they allow it and they do a background check as well. And they likely have a lot of homes and places that are being rented with BYU being right there. And then Spanish Fork also, their utility offers phone, internet, cable TV, a bunch of different things. And so that's why tenant accounts are allowed there. So this information comes from a 2021 Utah GFOA survey. So in that survey, I actually kind of pulled out some responses for cities on both columns to see what they said and what they're saying about their programs. And Nephi actually said that they had a 2017 resolution that made the property owner responsible for the bill, and they have saved, quote, $1 bajillion in write-off utility debt. I don't think that's an exact number. If it is, then I want
That's
to know
just
what
the
Nephi's
Biden
doing.
budget.
Sandy says that they are able to send a courtesy copy of the bills to the tenant with permission from the owner, very similar to our situation. Orem, before our landlord licensing program, which requires owners to have utilities in their name, we did allow tenants to sign up. We were sending a lot of accounts to collections, which is what made us rethink the process. And Granger Hunter also has a similar situation to us. We do allow tenants to pay for the water sewer bill on behalf of the property owner. When tenants are set up, they have the tenant's name on file, and we'll send 2 bills, one to the tenant and one to the owner. So then what are those where they have tenant independent accounts saying? And this is what some of them said in that survey. St. George, 67% of dollars written off were for rental accounts as compared to 7% for homeowners. Spanish Fork said, if we didn't offer the optional services of internet, phone, and cable, I would probably change our policy to not allow tenants to have the bill in their name. Parowan said that they were currently looking at requiring landlords to keep utilities in their name. Santa Clara said, unfortunately, we require renters to put the utilities in their name. However, someday we hope to change that. And Mapleton said, we currently allow renters to sign up for utilities, but we are in the process of changing our policy to only allow homeowners to have utilities in their name. So while the lists are pretty similar in size, there are quite a few cities that have changed from renters to having it in homeowners' names, and quite a few cities that would like to switch over because of collection issues and a few other things going on. So that is my presentation. If there's any questions or discussion, let's go ahead and have that.
Councilmember Pack, you and I were the ones who had originally requested this one. Do you want to share a couple thoughts, and I'll share a couple thoughts, and then anybody else, and we'll get a feel for where the council wants to go.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all the time and effort that you've invested in preparing and reporting this. And I'm grateful for Council Member Whitelock's comment because it helps me understand again that all of us can think differently and wonder, okay, what is the exact target that we're having here? Is it dumpsters? To me, that's an ancillary idea, still important, but the whole idea was tenant versus landlord, who's responsible for what. I've been a tenant and a landlord. I think most people are, especially earlier in life, not able to own a property. And I understand that it's similar to being a business owner. It's hard to find an employee that cares as much about your business as you do as the owner. Similarly, hard to find a tenant that might care about your property if you own it as much as you do. And in previous meetings, we've talked about the perceived psychology of tenant versus landlord philosophy. I feel it's good for tenants as much as possible to be able to monitor their own utility consumption and have the privacy and have accounts in their own names. We've talked about building credit and having more of a vested interest in the community. As has been expressed, a couple of council members are tenants. If possible, it seems it would be nice to have the landlord only paying for what the landlord really owns, which is real property, paying property tax and insurance, and be responsible for the HOA fee, but even that can be the responsibility of the tenant. As Councilmember Jacob mentioned, a savvy win-win relationship with the landlord and tenant could have that written into the contract already and alleviate a lot of these extra fees that would be imposed upon city budgets. I just feel landlords are beholden to banks to pay the mortgage, just like tenants are beholden to landlords for the rent. So, no superiority complex either way. So I agree. I like this outside the box thinking of striving to find a way that would not be a burden on city finances and funding, while also extending more autonomy to renters. I think, just my hypothesis, certainly don't have any credible evidence right now, but I would think that the more investment and autonomy that a renter feels mentally and emotionally, that might cut down on service calls that are contributing to costs to the city. I know that's why we instituted the Good Landlord program, where I can't remember the exact percentage, but an overwhelming majority of service calls were to tenant homes, rented homes, and so that's why we established the program. So that's why Councilmember McConaughey and I started talking about this, and don't want to speak for you, Chair, but that's what I'd have to say this evening. Thank you for your time.
So my reason in bringing this was a little bit different. I need to preface my comments with, when I bought the house in West Jordan, it was a very, very long time ago. I don't think the folks that helped me out are still here with the city. Highly doubt it. But when I bought my house, I was forced to rent it back to the seller for a number of months, just the way things close. I purchased it. I had to rent it back to them. They were supposed to be responsible for utilities till I took possession. I came into City Hall to take the appropriate steps to do what I needed to do, and was all but accused of being a deadbeat landlord because I wanted to keep the utilities in their name till it was time for me to take possession of the house. It was not a good experience. Again, I'm pretty sure the folks that were here or that were there aren't here now. Very different experience if you go into the finance department, talk to the folks over there. They will bend over backwards and do anything for you, help you with every little thing. I wish they had been there when I bought my house. That said, it's still kind of scarring, and I'm trying to think, well, what can I do so that others don't find themselves in the same position? I very much appreciated hearing some of the changes that have been made. I wonder if the change for the courtesy bill might have prevented me from having to pay multiple months of somebody else's utility bill. I think that's going in the right direction. Definitely love that we're looking into being able to pay online, and the dumpster program as well. Personally, I won't rehash everything Councilmember Pack said. I think in a perfect world, I'd love to see it where people can have their own bill. I don't know that the cost is worth it right now, or the headaches that go along with it. I appreciate the education that we've had, and I'm curious to hear from others if there's a desire to pursue something other than what we're already doing, or if there's four who would like to stay the course. So I see a lot of lights, and well, we'll just start. Councilmember Worthen, I think, was first, so we'll start there.
Okay, so I'm just gonna nutshell this. I like to make things easy. Sure. Currently, the homeowner is responsible for the utility bill.
Yep, that's correct.
Regardless if they let their tenant put it in their name. If the tenant doesn't pay it, the homeowner has to take care of it. And if the tenant wants a dumpster, they still need to get it approved by the homeowner if it's in the driveway. But if they can put it in the street.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And that's just the way it is today.
Yeah.
So they can get a dumpster. It just has to be in the street, and it has to be from April to October.
Yeah, and I want to give you guys credit because we've made these changes because it wasn't always that way, and so this is a change that will require a little bit of tweaking on our side, but that will allow a tenant to get that dumpster, put it in the street, and will not require,
With all that we're doing today, that wouldn't have any additional cost,
no.
cause that $50 could break us. So I'm just kidding. All right, so that, I just wanted to sum it up where we're at today, so.
When did the change
good
for the
with it.
tenant dumpsters start?
Well, with your permission, it will
Will
start as soon
start.
as we're done with this snow season.
So it hasn't
July.
yet.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't yet. We haven't done this in the past. This is a new change that I've had to get cleared through legal and through public works, and to make sure that everybody's happy with these changes before I can implement.
Right, what was presented tonight is what we would do this coming year.
This is a
And
proposed solution.
yes, yes. Here's my thoughts. I can appreciate that having a bill in your name might be helpful in regards, and I can appreciate all of that. But ultimately, I don't think the taxpayers in West Jordan should have to pay more money in taxes, property taxes, because we think on a philosophical level that we should let people have a utility bill in their name and not make a property owner responsible. So for me, I'm a no to anything that's going to cost us more. And this, and we see all these other cities that are saying basically what I hear from what we've been given is don't do it. We wish we hadn't done it. It's more trouble than it's worth. So I'm a strong no, but a very strong yes to allow them to access a dumpster during those months. I think that's a big portion of the year. I don't know, but I'm going to go back to that April 2nd, 2 feet of snow. I don't know that, any date you choose is perfect in Utah because you never know what it's going to do. But so that's where I'm at.
So they can pay online. That's only going to be the extra cloud storage.
Yeah.
If it's a property owner. So we can have them pay online, and that's the teeny tiny costs.
Correct.
Okay, so I would be okay with that piece of it, and
Yeah,
then the
it's-
dumpster thingy, which
it's
we're
very
already
small.
gonna do.
So it sounds like two okay for maintaining the course that's been outlined.
With adding the extra cloud storage.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
Yeah, I went to look up to see how I was paying, and what the owner of our townhouse does is she has it in the system, it CCs me. And when the email comes, it just has the pay now button, and I click pay now, and in fact, my card is on file and it's on auto pay. But it's
So-
still under hers, but it doesn't have there's nothing extra. Which I think is a great way to set up because the city's not spending anything else except I'm CC'd on the bill.
I would actually love it if every property owner did it that way and created a separate account like that on Invoice Cloud for their tenant. That would be wonderful.
So can we, Mr. Dodd, can we make them?
The difference here is that there are many property owners that have one customer number and many properties. So
They do
once you
too.
give that customer number away, then they have access to the payment for all of the properties and information on all the properties. So they're not specific.
So the
Interesting.
customer number is by person, not by property.
Right.
Correct.
Interesting, because I know they have multiple properties. So
Right, but she
really-
probably has a different customer number
Got
for all of them. So that was a choice on her part, right, when she
Yeah.
set up the account. But many property owners like to have one bill with all of their properties on it so that they know what the status is.
Well, I would say that landowner though is probably not going to be the one who wants to put the utilities in their tenant's name for that same reason.
That could be, but it could be also that they just want to make sure that the bill is paid and they're using a property management company typically.
Yeah, that makes
versus-
sense.
yeah.
Well, I don't want to spend any more money. Like, I don't want to deal with the collection fees and the headaches and stuff like that. But I do want to make sure we continue in the courtesy names, the dumpster option, and being able, because I think if tenants had easier way to pay online, it's going to be easier way to get the money.
And in your situation, the tenant account, if the landlord goes online and just puts in their tenant's email address and says, yep, send them bills, that's wonderful. And we don't have to do any of that tenant stuff at all, right? And you can pay online, you can do everything you need, you can see your bills. It would really only benefit those landlords that are very hands-off and maybe don't want to use the online portion themselves, so they're not going to sign up their tenant for it. It would be for people that are maybe receiving a copy in their name, but their landlord is not using the online system currently, and so we don't want to compel people to use it. We would love it if they did, but we're not going to compel and say, this is the only way your tenant can get a copy.
I wouldn't mind the compelling.
in that case, we're gonna move forward and compel everybody to do that, because that's what I would prefer.
Just a couple of thoughts. Not everybody uses the same rental agreement in this valley. Trying to do stuff that, when I was renting out some property on behalf of a family trust, I wanted to make sure that the utility bills, that I didn't get stuck with somebody wasting water. So I put in the lease that they were responsible for the actual cost of utilities. Other landlords just cover the cost of utilities in the rental agreement. The more that we try to get involved in this process, the more complicated it's going to be. When you look at the one city that said, well, we look at the rental agreements, it's like, oh yeah, I want to look at, I don't want to be in the business of looking at rental agreements, and I don't know. At the end of the day, I agree with Council Member Whitelock that philosophically it's not worth charging our utility customers, which would be our water users, our solid waste users, stormwater users. I don't want to increase the rates more than we have to increase the rates, because we have a now we're going to have a discussion coming up sooner or later on the philosophies of recycling, but that's a different story. Isn't that right, Denise? We had a nice discussion yesterday on the philosophical of recycling green waste, and we'll save that one until June. But I don't want to raise the costs. Those costs, I'm going to say that those costs are probably, the $120,000 is probably conservative. Particularly if we have to send a meter reader out and check meter readings, and when the tenant moves in and when the tenant moves out, and trying to keep track of a lot of that stuff is just extra paperwork. I'm with what I'm good with is the proposed changes that we've got, that you have we have the dumpster rental program for renters. I think that helps meet the goal of the citywide, I'm going to say citywide dumpster program. It doesn't discriminate that much. It allows everybody, it allows the appropriate people to get a dumpster, and it allows the tenants to monitor their bills, pay the bills. If the landlord says they're responsible, if the landlord just works it into the rent, then it worked into the rent. But that allows the property owner to manage their business more appropriate. At the end of the day, it is, whether we like this or not, the landlord-tenant relationship is a business relationship, and the landlord is running a business, and what we've got to do is keep it literally as business friendly as possible. So that's why I'm not into mandating lots of things, or let's let the business owner, really, when it comes down to it, the business owner is the one that's going to manage how it's paid, and we're dealing with the business owner with the business license. And I mean, we license the rental properties as a business, right? So we're dealing with the business owner. And what I don't want to see, using that same analogy, is that rarely am I going to say, well, I'm going to go to a local dentist's office and I'm going to allow, and deal with the customer of the dentist. I'm still going to keep that same relationship. I'm going to deal with the business owner. I'm dealing with the landlord, and his customer is the renter. And it's the same as, if we deal with Smiths and all of their customers or whatever, keep it consistent, keep it cheap.
All right. we don't necessarily need a motion on this one. It sounds like the desire of the council is to keep moving forward the direction that finance is already going. So with that, unless there's anything else on this item, we can move on to the next. I do want to point out the time. If we maintain this current pace, we'll be on track to get to administrative items right about 11:18 p.m. No, not quite tomorrow, but 11:18 is what we're on track for. 53 minutes per item. So with that, thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Council.
Greg, thanks for pinch hitting. And that brings us to the item from council members Bloom and Whitelock about regulations and PRDs. Who would like to?
Councilmember Pack's mic has been on the.
Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't
Thank
on when
you.
I started the wrap up. I
No, thank you. I
apologize.
appreciate it. It has nothing to do with the previous item or this item. Just briefly, prior to the council adopting the new meeting schedule for 2023.
So you really want personal privilege? Is that what you're asking for?
Personal privilege, thank
Okay.
you. Just mentioning that I'll have to continue the remainder of the meeting via Zoom tonight and May 17th. I already had items scheduled for those evenings before we made the committee of the whole schedule last year. So I'll be on Zoom now. Thank you.
Beautiful. We'll watch for you there.
Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. So I'm sure we all recall a redevelopment of some infill project, and there was lots and lots of time spent on it. And so Councilmember Bloom and I are bringing this forward saying, hey, maybe if there are some things that I know I personally feel strongly about that just should be standards in any development. And we ironically heard kind of a little bit of a segue into it because of the dumpsters and how long are dumpsters and how long are driveways. And so after that time and Pamela and I spoke, then I went and met with Mr. Langsford and said, here's some concerns. What are your thoughts? And he can speak for himself, but basically we talked about maybe having a standard driveway length that no matter where you're building, if you're going to have a driveway that's in the front, that it's a certain length that we've just determined. And we have that as, I believe, 22 feet in one of the other sections of code. And then maybe some of our setbacks, we want to say those are the same too. And that, there's just, and street widths, maybe, a few things that we say are standard no matter what kind of development you're bringing to us. I just feel it would help staff and it would help us and it would speed up these discussions in this meeting. So that's why we're bringing up fourth. Councilmember Bloom, do you have more to add?
No, along those lines, even on the standards, when we did the ride-alongs with the plows, the new neighborhoods, some of those roundabouts weren't big enough. And I want to make sure we're protecting our city equipment and making sure the roads get plowed. So things like that, I want to make sure we're looking in the code, looking at these developments being built and make sure we're not only, consistent, but we're also taking care of our facilities and not having the plow drivers swear.
Well, they might do that anyway.
Scott, before you say anything, let me jump in here. I agree with the consistent standards. What I'm wondering is, there's two things. One, I'd like to do one of the 6 month moratoriums on PCs and PRDs until we can figure that out, because we can put we can issue a more, or put the notice and do a more, the temporary land use orders. Thank you. But the other thing is, and this may be part of the same thing as consistency, but we haven't looked at this for years. And the question is, what is and like we talked about in the general plan last week, one of the aspirational goals is to decrease urban sprawl, right? Well, the question is, when our bulk and lot standards were set, we have, for example, on an R18, we're at about 75, 80 feet wide. if I remember right, 85 feet, somewhere in there, 75. I went back and looked at Salt Lake City's ordinance. It's really interesting. They have two zones. What would be an R17 for us and an R112, and they don't have anything else. And they have a set width. And so the question would be not just for PRD and PC, and I agree with you that driveways need to be 22 feet in length, but I'm not sure that I care what the setback of the house is. If the garage wants to sit back farther, the driveway can be 22 feet, but the house could be far, you know what I mean? And so I would almost like to look at a holistic, not just zoning and subdivision regulations with PRD and PC, but maybe the setbacks for R1 through R16 through R112. At the same time, we're looking at PRD and PC, because I agree with you. We need some better consistency, and instead of just focusing on one little thing, maybe we ought to focus in on the holistic process.
I agree with the holistic process, and I agree that it needs to look at, and I think this is probably the first stepping stone and to get into that aspect of the holistic approach.
So we've got 3. Is there one other person that is desirous of this? Okay.
So are we discussing it, or are we just discussing whether we want to discuss it?
Well, we're discussing if we want to move forward with it, basically, is the desire. Is this something that there's 4 or more of us that are saying, yes, we'd like to work on this, or not?
You can count me in for having any discussion you want to have. I am good for discussing things. I am not good for discussing whether we should want to discuss things. This is discussing.
I want to see the staff and us look into the code to see where we can make it more consistent. So when we have these developments come in, we don't have to argue.
Yeah, and my thought there was, if we're in favor, it's a good time to then say, staff, would you get this back to us and give them a time that we'd like to have some of their thoughts come back to us. We've got their thoughts, then we'll have our thoughts, and then we can move forward, is my idea.
So to formalize this, I am going to make a motion. We can do this under Robert's Rules of Order. I'm going to make a motion that we refer this to the Land Use Committee and to staff for further discussion and refinement to bring back to the council. Is that what we want? Because to have a meaningful discussion, we're going to have some parameters about what we really want. So I would recommend that the Land Use Committee and the staff work together to come back with, like what Tyler did, with a couple of proposals, a couple of courses of action. So that's kind of the motion, is that we refer that to the Land Use Committee.
Councilmember Bloom, how do you feel about that?
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Guess not.
Is that a second? Sure. Okay, so motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Worth, and discussion to the motion.
What are the cons about it going to a land use committee?
So for me, the cons are, it's another step, it's another brick in the wall, it's just another delaying. It's got to come to the full council anyway. Let's just all talk about it.
Yeah.
And
So,
I'm going to speak, I mean, since there's a motion and a second, we should be speaking to the motion that was made. I would speak in opposition to this motion because I'd like to discuss as a council first what direction we want to go before it goes to the Land Use Committee and starts taking too much life. I'm personally hesitant with this because I like the flexibility we have in a PRD and a PC zone, but I would be open to setting something in there saying, here's what our expectations are. If you're going to deviate, there needs to be very, very good justification, and it's got to get approval through whatever the process is, and I'd like to see that. I'm not necessarily in favor of saying let's pause everything, let's look at every zone that's out there all at the same time for setbacks and redoing everything all at once. I want to be very prescriptive in how we do it, so I'm going to be in opposition to the motion.
Okay, I'm gonna pull my second. It's too much discussion.
All right, so if there's no other second, motion will die for lack of a second.
So I guess my preferred method at this point would be to just ask staff to consider what they feel would be good parameters to have in no matter what zone it is. So to me it is a safety issue, and that's really what I'm looking at, is because if your driveways aren't long enough and things are hanging out into the sidewalk, it's a safety issue. If your roads aren't wide enough, your cul-de-sacs aren't big enough, it's a safety issue. So those are the kinds of things that I was hoping we could just say, here are some that are safety issues. So let's say you've got a lot of leeway, but these things have to be done. So that's where I'm at.
Real quick, I just want to make sure for the record it shows that Councilmember Pack is in the Zoom. I don't know if that was caught earlier, but wanted to acknowledge it.
But street widths aren't in the zoning regulations, nor are they in the subdivision regulations. They're in the street design standards. So if you want to talk about street widths, we have to expand this to go to street design standards and include public works at the same time.
And this is part of what the staff will advise us on. And I also want to say this is also an ADA issue, because all these short driveways are leading out into the sidewalks, and I've noticed people trying to walk, and it's an ADA issue. So it is beyond just safety. But yes, that's part of what the staff will come back with us and advise.
But the topic right now is amending Title 13 and Title 14. It has nothing to do with street design standards. So what I'm saying is that we have to provide staff clear direction, and we're not good at I'm going to say this, we're not good at providing clear direction. That's why I made one motion, but it obviously didn't work. But we need to provide clear direction at what the staff is going to look at and bring us some options, because we just can't say, well, go look at what works for PRD and PC and streets. Because we need to make sure we're clear on what we're doing.
So I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we send to staff the request to look at areas that we need to look in how we're building our city, and that it include driveways, and that it include anything that staff thinks should be standardized that will make it a safer environment in our city. And it can include other things aside from Title 13 and 14 if staff feels that is a good idea. And then to bring that back to us. And I'm hopeful that staff could bring that back to us, give me an idea. I don't want it to be like some of the other things on our list.
Well, I'd like to consult with a few folks. And I believe, and Brian, you can perhaps help me, Nestor, our new traffic engineer, is working on a lot of traffic calming and street standards right now.
So just a quick point of order, we've got.
Can it be, just shake your heads like this or like this? Can you have it back by July?
For discussion? Yeah.
The more specific you make this, the faster you're going to get this back. So if you tell us to look at setback, driveway, side, whatever. If you tell us specifically what you want us to look at,
Cindy,
that will mean you get back really fast. The less specific you are, the longer it's going to take us.
Ms. Quick, I'm going to reword my motion. I move that we request of staff to bring back information on driveways, setbacks, cul-de-sacs, and road width by July.
I will second that.
Any discussion to the motion, Councilmember Green?
I would like to add to that, looking at the stuff that I gave you tonight, the stormwater. the stormwater, the urban stormwater design and urban street design that Nestor's working on to integrate those into the street designs too. Because that's a safety issue. A built-in traffic calming measure is a safety issue.
All right.
I will be amenable to adding that to my motion.
Chair and council, can I just ask, you mentioned July, do you want to say by the second meeting in July, work session, do you have a date specific or just July?
Yes, we can add the second meeting, which is the work meeting.
See what the administration.
Mayor or Corbin, I'm seeing lights and hands.
When you put date certain on things to return like this, it can be very challenging relative to things that come up over the next 3 months or priorities that are already in process. So we hear you. We want to respond. We'll follow up and we'll keep you posted on updates. We're trying to do a better job of that. But when you put date certain must return to this body on this date, it often gets frustrated for you because it's a product that isn't as complete as we would like to give you, or it changes other priorities in process.
I'm going to say something. And when we don't put a date certain on it, it never gets done. I am going to tell you that we didn't put a date certain on certain items, and it's been nearly a year and they're not done. And I'm not going to go into specifics, but we have to put some deadlines on. Otherwise, they're just not going to get done.
I'm not sure, as far as discussion of the motion goes, I'll be opposed because I'm not sure this is even appropriate in the form of government we have. The council doesn't get to direct the staff like this. We can send a wish, we can say please, and we can say mother may I, or mayor may I. We can set policy, we can set standards, and we can set budget, but I don't think we can tell staff, hey, prepare this report and bring it back to us by a certain date. That's not our staff. I don't know that this is appropriate. I think it's kind of cute, it's kind of fun, but I don't think this is the way to get the things done that we want done. If there's something that we see as deficient, I think we should put a proposal together if we want to change the code, and we can do that, and then we can run it up the flagpole. But I don't like this vague kind of staff come up with a better idea and bring it back to us. I don't think that's our spot. I think we can ask, but I don't think we can order.
So following behind Councilmember Jacob, I'll also speak in opposition to the motion because I think there's still a lot of opportunity for discussion by the council. And Councilmember Whitelock, you mentioned a couple things that we'd like to discuss. I think we can probably put a framework together for that without having to go to staff. I think we can I think we can work with you to put something together to bring to a future council meeting relatively quickly, where we're still in kind of a think out loud process mode. What do we want staff to do? So they get a little bit more direction, and from that meeting we can ask them to start making fundamental changes, foundational changes. But I think it needs more conversation with us of a council, like specifically what do we want to see with street widths, what do we want to see with setbacks, what do we want to see with all these different items. I think it's more of a brainstorming with the council first, so I would be in opposition to that motion.
I also see this as a way to help everybody's job run easier, especially when developments come in, because I don't want to nobody wants to deal with what we did with last year. But I also want to rely on our experts in our city to come up with what should be guidelines. So I don't want to say, hey, this should be a guideline, and then you guys like, I don't know about that. I want to be able to have this collaborative, and that's, I think, where we're coming from, is a collaborative work session to figure out what should we change if we need to change anything.
Mayor, will you say it's okay that we can ask your staff to do this?
See,
Mayor, may we?
here's the ironic thing. A few minutes ago, I suggested that the council work on this through its land use committee and come up with some general ideas, and I got shot to hell because but the whole idea would be to get something back in front of the council that the land use committee could work with the staff and come up with some ideas and come up with some things that might work. Then we can talk about them as the full council and if we sit here and we want to try to brainstorm on setbacks and all of these things, we're going to have a whole work session on nothing but setbacks and driveway lanes and those kind of things without and then we're going to say, hey, staff, go back and study the pros and cons, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have another whole night discussion on that. I just don't see where we're going with this, but okay.
So, not to speak out of turn, but 10.3B203 says the council may not publicly or privately give orders to a subordinate of the mayor. A council.
Can I
We can't
ask,
do this.
Tawny had brought up a minimum standards bill from the state. Where did that go? Because that concerns me with this.
It didn't go anywhere. There are the minimum standards was SB 174, and it was procedural. It was basically procedural in nature. It didn't create a lot of standards.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. I'm not seeing any more lights for discussion. I'm not sure if Councilmember Pack's at a position where he can vote electronically or not, but since he might be, Cindy, could you walk us through a vote? We can't do all in favor because we need electronic, yeah.
Well, if we were unanimous, but I don't think it's going to be unanimous.
Okay, let's start with Councilmember Green.
I'm going to go no.
Councilmember Worthing.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bloom.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob. Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Chair McConaughey.
No.
Okay, I'm showing that tonight. Oh, Councilmember Pack.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that shows the motion failed 3-4.
All right, Councilmember Whitelock, Councilmember Bloom, you were the ones that brought this. I was going to ask if you would be okay working to put together a framework to bring back to the council so we can have something more specific when we have an ask of staff.
Chair, I got a good feel of what the council's looking for. I'll work with staff and we can put something together and bring it back without you having to make an official move for that.
Thank you, and if you could include, obviously, Councilmember Whitelock, Councilmember Bloom, as you're doing that, that'd be appreciated. Okay. Councilmember Whitelock, Councilmember Bloom, anything else on this one?
No.
All right, our next item. Thank you, Scott, Greg, Brian. Next item is Gold Star Memorial for Veterans Memorial Park. This is Councilmember Green and Councilmember Whitelock.
Alan, will you forward the slide? It should be in the slide, shouldn't it? The pictures?
It's in your packet. I did not prepare slides.
Oh, okay. In your packet, there's a picture of the Sandy City Veterans, or the Sandy City Gold Star Memorial. And what Councilmember Whitelock and I are proposing is to get the council feedback if we want to proceed with putting a Gold Star Memorial in Veterans Park, someplace over by the Veterans Memorial. The cost of the city would be $60,000, plus the pad, the concrete pad to put it on. The, these, what we would do would be similar to what South Jordan did, and that would be that we would pay the initial 60K and announce the 60K, and then announce a fundraising drive for citizens to donate to the city to help offset the cost of this. And so what we're looking at is, does the city want to continue? Does the city want to put one in? We would be, Draper beat us to the punch. This would be the 6th memorial in the valley. That picture is just another memorial that Sandy City put next to theirs. That's not part of the veterans. The veterans one is that one, and it honors the families. It actually honors the families of the soldiers and sailors and airmen who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for the nation, so that's what we're seeking is, do we have 4 votes that we can do a budget amendment for the 60K to begin the process and work with the appropriate foundation to get this built and get it installed into the Veterans Memorial Park.
Councilmember Whitelock is co-sponsor. Do you have anything you want to add?
I just think it's a wonderful way to thank those that serve in our city and that have served our country. So I just think it's a really good thing for our community.
Yes, I'm very much in favor of allocating the money for this. I think a couple of things that might be cool is to have a design contest, maybe, or have some, students or somebody submit ideas, or veterans or whoever, throw some ideas out there. But I would love to see it include, kind of like the law enforcement memorial does up at the Capitol, include like a brick with the name, if we can identify. I don't know how many Gold Star West Jordan family, veterans who have died in service we have in the city specifically, and I don't know if we can find that out, but if we can, I'd love to have it have names on it. I think that would be way cool.
Well, so the memorial itself is a standard design. It's this black granite design with the silhouette of the soldier saluting. That's the standard Gold Star memorial. But Zach, I think you're right. Having a part of the plaza that we could put bricks and engrave names of those families that were that have lost loved ones from the city is a fantastic idea, and that doesn't cost. Engraving a brick doesn't cost that much more, and we could easily put out feelers for names of and put those in. So I like that idea.
Is this part of the Veterans Memorial Park Master Plan, or is this separate?
This would be added, it would be separate, but it would be added out just to the most likely to, my envision would be, this would be added just east of the current memorial, tie the concrete into each other and have it face so that in the morning the sun shines through the soldier and have it faced east.
I was just wondering if we can add this to the master plan, wouldn't that help as well with the development of it?
It would, but if we wait for the Veterans Memorial Master Plan, we might be able to put this in sometime in June of 2026.
If you're lucky, but I think we can make a quick amendment to the master plan and just say, we're just gonna add this in as a one-line amendment to it.
That's what
Throw it in there.
Yep, I agree.
And we can do that by ordinance.
All right, so Councilmember Green, I know you talked about the possibility of a budget amendment to get it going sooner rather than later.
Oh, and I talked to Ms. Steck. We got the 60K. We have the ability to do a budget amendment with the 60K. Actually, we have almost all of the 60K in our contingency fund, but we have the 60K in the CIP that we can do.
So, obviously, it appears the majority of the council is in favor. I don't know timing wise what would be achievable on that. Corbin, I do notice your lights on, please.
I just want some clarification. So we have started the Veterans Park Master Plan process. We have, if you look back in the from the minutes from last February about the Veterans Park process, we've got about 10 other projects, renovations, additions to Veterans Park that have been proposed or discussed to occur at Veterans Park. What you're saying tonight is you want to do this immediately before the master planning process is complete, or at least take the 60,000 out and start the fundraising and the moving. I'm just trying to understand the prioritization and the timing relative to the master plan and relative to the other things that have been brought up.
My goal would be to set aside the 60K, get this started. We need to reach out to the foundation that builds these, get it started, get the actual memorial started. Obviously, there you can see from Sandy Cities that one of the panels has a picture of Sandy City Hall and the Sandy logo. So there is some customization. We need to get that started, and yes, it would be to be done immediately and not wait until we get, because like I said, if we wait for the Veterans Park Master Plan and try to integrate this, we won't be sixth in line to have this in the city. We will be number 35th or 40th, because the Veterans Park Master Plan isn't anywhere close to being done, and I'd like to see this in sooner than later.
So my thought, Mr. Lee, is this is just an addition to what we already have there on that plaza area. It's not like adding an arts building or renovating, or those are the other things that have been asked are bigger things. To me, this is just an addition to an existing amenity that we have in the park. So yes, I would like to see it not wait for that plan, that we just move forward with it.
One thing I've heard in the last month is renovating our current Veterans Memorial Plaza area proposed. I'm not surprised. Anyways, I've heard that proposed. What I'm hearing is do this right away, or at least get the funding set aside until we get started on this right away, independent of all other projects. I just want to make sure, I want to be clear on that, because this will become a fixed point in the master plan. And if you do want to renovate, if the majority of you do want to move forward with renovating the plaza, you've now created a fixed point to renovate around, etc.
I think, personally, I think that maybe maybe we need to have a bit of a meeting that you get clarification on all these asks for the park, because I'm not sure that there are for and more on all of the ideas. So maybe that's a step we need to have. But for me, I don't see that plaza being totally redone. I see adding a flagpole or two and adding this. And to me, that's a little different than totally renovating that area. So maybe I'm not clear on what you've got.
There's a few other lights.
I was going to say, I kind of assumed that was a fixed point anyway, because of what we already have there. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the modifications I personally would like to see is with that monument, there's that concrete wall that has the different images depicted on there. I think some of the elements may not be conducive to the feeling that we're trying to provide at the memorial. in particular, there's that, I'm not sure what that called, a relief, or the depiction like Uncle Sam there on it. It looks a little bit out of place and doesn't really bring the feeling that the rest of it does. Things, I mean, we've got the flagpoles that are out there, we've got the lighting, but the lighting has issues because it's underground. There's water issues with that, and the water. I personally would very much like to see what we can do to bring the dignity back to that memorial, and I think there's going to be some renovation along with that. I think, but I don't know what that would be because we haven't had that discussion yet. But I would like to see the permanent incorporation of a Gold Star memorial. I just don't know how that would tie to everything else out there. Councilmember Green, Councilmember Bloom.
I don't think this is part of. It's incorporated into, like what Councilmember Whitelock said, it's incorporated into the current plaza. But if we decided to add, we do need to add we do need to add at least one flag to the current plaza, one flagpole, because we're missing our friends in the Space Force. We need at least one more flag. There's some discussion on the walls, but that's centralized in that particular area. This would be on a pad near there, something similar to the obelisk that's already there, in some fashion, to honor the families. And I just as soon see us get this going, because it'll take several months for us to get the graphics done, work with the foundation, start the fundraising. And if we wait until September, it won't be done for another 3 years. I'm just telling you. And so I'd like to see some progress made in Veterans Park, that we're doing something to honor some residents and their families, and do that fairly quickly, than try to postpone that because, never mind. Instead of trying to postpone it.
Corbin, what are your concerns of us pushing this forward fast? I want to make sure I'm seeing all angles so that we're not creating more hardships on staff and whatnot, but also make sure we do this in a timely manner.
Not concerns, just wanting to make sure I understand priorities. As soon as we put this in, the rest of the master plan goes around. It becomes a fixed point that the rest of the master plan works around. So I just want to make sure that we're doing this, and then we don't regret where we place it a year from now or 6 months from now as we finish the master plan. I guess that's.
Yeah, no, I wanted to be clear because I felt there was something.
As well as prioritization. If you do this, then you're not moving forward as quickly with one of the other wish list items.
I don't mind it being a fixture based off of everything else.
And I just wanted to say I sympathize.
I'm really not opposed. I'm very supportive, and I'm not trying to be obstinate. I'm trying to ask for clarity and priority.
And I want to say I sympathize, because we do this, right? We say we want to march down a path, and we start marching down a path, and somebody else gets an idea. Oh, you know what else would be cool? And you've got 17 different directions after a year of nice discussions and things, and you're trying to prioritize them all. So I want to say I feel for you, and I'm sorry, because I know I'm part of that too, and I throw things up onto the list, and we, if you had an Excel chart with all you had a Gantt chart, on an Excel thing, or a timeline, and we throw things new onto the bottom of that all the time. It's like, well, should that go between row 14 and 15, or should that go between row 7 and 8, or exactly where should we put this? So I just want to say I understand. I'm sorry.
And with this being Veterans Memorial Park, and if we install this and then things are designed around that, I think that would be beautiful.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Chris, Councilmember McConaughey, with the designs on those walls that are there. Could probably use a refresh or a redo as part of that, not necessarily as part of this.
Yeah. And if, like every other thing we bring up, if this could be priority number 1, along with all of our other 4,000 priority number 1s,
But if we do a budget amendment, if we do a budget amendment, we bring back a budget amendment, it will start the ball rolling because that commits the funds and then we can work with the foundation and everything else. So that would be my goal is to have a budget amendment brought back. And then that would be the council's formal declaration that yes, we want this done. And it would it would put that on the priority list to spend the money.
So can't we get things ordered and not install? I mean, do we have to install it immediately, or can we at least get the funds and get the design? Because you're saying it's going to take quite a while for that anyway.
We can get the funds and we can get this started. We probably have to have it within the next 3 or 4, and we may be able to have part of the Veterans Park master plan done to where we know where we actually want this in relationship to the rest of the memorial. But by doing a budget amendment and starting it would give us a couple of months to figure that out.
So I have not heard any opposition from anybody on the council. I'm going to look at Mr. Anderson and ask if, as council director, you can take the initiative on this, work with the necessary staff to get things rolling as quickly as possible and bring back whatever is necessary to the council as soon as it becomes available.
Yes, we will work on bringing a budget amendment. I think that would be the first step because that would also authorize progress on this matter.
All right. I'm seeing Ms. Steck coming to the mic.
So typically we aren't bringing a budget amendment back to you until like April or May by the time we've got one ready. So there's an option for you to start this project using council contingency.
Yeah, and if that's the quickest route,
We need council to have like a or you know what I mean, give us direction to use council contingency in the meantime.
Yeah, we'll work with council member Wild Flashback, council director Anderson on that part. Do you have to have direction in this meeting, or is it okay that we give yes, this is the direction we want to go and work through him?
Well, we can't proceed forward with work that would cost money unless you've approved it as being able to be spent. And the quickest way for us to get money to start a project is to use council contingency.
Yeah.
And then we can do a budget amendment and bring it back
But we
in. But
can't-
it would be, I don't want the council to think that we're not being responsive if we don't bring a budget amendment back in 2 meetings.
Can we approve a spending of council contingency without a resolution or a thing? We just, if 4 people go like this with their heads right now, we can call that good?
And
Is that
that's
what I'm
something that we
hearing?
work
Is that what
through.
I'm hearing?
That's something we work through
People?
council director Anderson, which is why
It's
I was
already
suggesting we
it's
go
already
that
an
route
approved
rather
item
than
in the
going
budget
through.
and it's available for council to spend as they please.
So
Council contingency is money that's already been allocated by the council to spend as the council deems appropriate. So I think all I would need is just 4 more of you to say, yes, that's what we want to do, and we can proceed down those steps.
I'm fine moving forward. Thank you.
All right. Is Councilmember Green, Councilmember Whitelock, any other discussion to this item?
No, thank you.
All right. Our next item is also Councilmember Green and Councilmember Whitelock, which is
It's actually green and blue.
on the request for council action. It says Councilmember Green, Councilmember Whitelock.
Yeah, we're on the wrong one.
The lift station.
Oh, lift station, I was ahead. My bad.
So discussion topic D. And we're glad that Mr. Davenport is here because but given a situation that we have seen potentially in a couple areas of the city, with potential where sewer lines may have to try to run uphill, what Kayleen and I are proposing is that we put in Title 13, and we provided a draft copy of that ordinance, and obviously that ordinance, because it's Title 13 and it's a land use regulation, would have to go back through staff and through the Planning Commission and come back to us. But what we're proposing is taking that draft lift station language and not just having it in city engineering standards, but actually have an ordinance that describes exactly how we do lift stations in West Jordan City. And the draft ordinance was thanks to a city in Utah County. They had a nice little lift station ordinance, and we were able to just take it, make some modifications, and so what we're asking for is council support to send that back through staff and the planning commission so that we are proactive in dealing with the possibility of having lift stations in West Jordan City. And Greg, if you want to come up and tell us what you think about having an ordinance in, I think I've heard what you think about an ordinance, but will you tell the council?
Well, I think it's up to your discretion as to whether you want to include it in ordinance or not. But if you want to know my feeling about lift stations, I'm not a fan of lift stations. Lift stations require constant care, 24-hour supervision, and in most cases, a redundant system because when lift stations fail, homes flood. And so in the past, when the city has had lift stations, we have had to have operators on call 24/7 in case of power failures, in case of pump failures, in case of storm events, because believe it or not, storm events also fill up lift stations. And so the city has done all it can to get rid of lift stations that are public.
Thank you. And from my perspective, by putting this in an ordinance, it clearly makes a council direction, and it ensures where the liability falls. The wording of the ordinances, the draft ordinance, is pretty clear about where the liability falls and who has to maintain it, and what kinds of alarm systems and all those kind. Even if we ever did approve it, it does provide that, so it doesn't shift the costs to the city.
Councilmember Whitelock, as co-sponsor, do you have anything to add?
I'm just going to say, I just think it's a timely thing to get it in place so that if and when someone asks for one, we're prepared and we don't have to work on it then.
Mayor Burton, I noticed your light, please.
Thank you, Council Chair. This is going from my experience as an electrician. I got to work in one of these in Provo when I was.
Was it a crappy experience?
It was. I found it very draining, and so I was on call. And
I would
had
think
to go
it'd
out.
be more uplifting.
It was not uplifting. I made it uplifting. I had to go out there in winter when it was really yucky and wade through, as you can imagine. And this had a redundant system, and both systems were down, and I had to get it up and going again, and I did. Meanwhile, some residents were driving through unspeakables as we're trying to get this up and going, and I did, and I redesigned it, and fortunately, as far as I know, it never failed again. But because of my experience in this, if somebody in the city, if you choose not to do this, if someone in the city wants to do this, I will not approve it. So I appreciate you taking a look at this, but let me know, I totally agree that this is not something we want in our city.
Councilmember Jacob, then I want to weigh in.
Besides, we as a council do a good enough job elevating the crap around here.
As soon as you said we, my brain went somewhere else. So I had a couple thoughts on both sides of this one. Number one, the city doesn't own any lift stations, nor do we want any. But if somebody has private property and they want to do something there, I don't necessarily want to prohibit them from use of their property as they seem fit. So if we do update our ordinance, just to make sure it's very, very clear that, well, and going through the engineering requirements, it was, where is it? 14, was it 14 and 15? It seemed that it was pretty clear. All private, I would almost like to codify what we've got in 2.14, 2.15 of our engineering standards. All private sewer line construction shall be, I'll skip that one. Sanitary sewer pumping stations where they cannot be avoided may be permitted with a private sewer line and shall not be located within a public sewer line. I
The
want to
ordinance,
make
the
sure
ordinance
that,
does actually have that in it.
if you would let me finish, I'd like to make sure that we do capture that, and then the residential, there were some, sorry, I got thrown off a little bit there. Let me go back to the proposed language. I'd like to see it simplified a little bit so that we're not doing too much with design or safety within the ordinance, but just being very, very clear that I like D. I would take D, but I'd modify this a little bit. West Jordan City does not maintain any publicly owned lift stations. I don't just want to say we don't. I would like to say West Jordan City does not own or maintain any lift stations. I don't want to see us in a position where somebody might say, hey, you should be adopting this because it's used by members of the public. I like E. Lift stations are only permitted on private property. No lift station shall be dedicated to the city and will not be owned, maintained, or operated by the city. And I like G. Any and all damages resulting from the lift stations, including but not limited to overflow, spills, backflows, are the responsibility of the owner and applicant. And then H, overflow, spills, backflows shall be subject to fine, penalties, and regulatory enforcement by the city. I don't know that I'd like that much more than that, especially when we get into the safety requirements and starting to say, if you do have it, it shall have this, shall have that. I don't want to have to worry about updating and maintaining this part of code as engineering standards hopefully improve over the years. And the maintenance section as well, I would prefer that not be in there. I would be okay with the warning system and emergency response part to an extent, but that's really what I'd like to see. Just very nice, clean, short, simple. If you're going to do this, it's not the city's not going to touch it, and you can't screw up anything the city has. If you have any impact on any of their neighbors, you're going to be responsible for any damages.
So my thought was that this is our proposal. Now it should go to staff. Staff should weigh in. Then of course we wouldn't want to leave legal out because they can add lots of words to it because that's always fun. And then have it come back to us, and then we can look at it and see if we're like it or not. Because I think at this point it goes to staff. So, and I actually do like having a little more structure of what you can and you can't, because my experience on this council is every time it's, well, this is our thought, but it's not actually our law, I don't necessarily think we get the best products.
So really the intent was for this tonight was for us to get at least four of us to send it from us to Greg and his staff, and because it's planning, it's got to, the mayor, and because it's part of the zoning ordinance, it's got to go through Scott and his staff and legal, and it has to go to planning commission. It's got a few months, but if we've started this process now, it puts everybody on notice that we're going to change the regulation, and that will help that if somebody decides they want to try to do a lift station between now and the ordinance taking effect, they're on notice that this is coming. So that's really the reason is do we have 4 votes to send this, to have staff that we can work on this, and so going back to the other one, we've provided the draft and the input so that we can give it to staff. So hopefully, yeah.
So my question on that is when you say we provided the draft, that's from 2 members of the council. When would the rest of the council be able to weigh in on that? If not now? Well, after it goes through planning commission, after it goes through staff, legal, planning commission.
It's going to come back, right? And they're going to make some modifications. I think people have heard some of your concerns tonight that can be addressed and put into this. But here's what's funny is a few minutes ago, somebody said, well, why doesn't we have more information for the council? We give more information to the council and propose a draft. and now it's too much information. So I can't win. I can't win for losing tonight. But the idea was to take the draft and send it through the staff process. There's plenty of time to, as it goes through the staff comp, you can send emails to Greg, you can send emails to Corbin. You've made comments tonight about that draft. I think that would be appropriate to incorporate those.
I guess for me, I envisioned that this was just a high level idea, and we were giving it to staff to get their input, and then they'd give it to us, and we'd look at it and say, yeah, or we want to, as a body, we want to get rid of this stuff out of it, and then give it back to staff to then go through the whole process of the planning commission and all of that. But that was just my thought process. I mean, I guess we can go through it tonight too.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was, because I had assumed that
unless council member Worthen says no.
No, I had assumed that. I actually really appreciated that it was here in front of us and there was some sort of definition of this is what we're thinking about when it's brought to the council. So I was thinking we were going to have conversation about what was there and what does the council want to keep in before it's kicked over to staff and legal and all the rest. But since it's the item between the two of you, how would you like to proceed tonight?
Chair, I'm good with that. If you want to find out what everybody thinks to take in and out, and make sure everybody agrees before we send it to them, though, because for me, it's just important that it's for more of us that say take that out.
Councilmember Green?
Doesn't matter to me.
All right. I've not heard anybody else other than myself express a desire to go through this. Is the majority of the council happy with what's here, or did you want to look at this tonight or wait till it comes back?
I'm happy with most everything that's in there, and I wouldn't mind waiting until it comes back because I like what's been proposed so far.
Okay, Councilmember Green?
Yeah, give me something to vote on.
All right. It appears I'm in the minority, so is there anybody else who wants to add anything to this one before we move on? Councilmember Anderson, did you need to or Council Director Anderson?
That's going to go
Sorry, I've
with
not
me.
had breakfast nor lunch today, so
It's
it's
going to go a long way. If I can just add, part of having the committee of the whole is to have the discussion of the council so that there's clear direction to give to staff of what they would like. Then when we bring it back to a council meeting, it's been refined with the desires of the body of the council for action. If you would like to expedite this, my suggestion to you would be to come up with the framework and the pieces that 4 of you can agree to, so that then staff has some clear direction
they've
to bring
presented
something
a
back.
document that 4 are happy with, so is
Okay.
there anything else that's needed?
And for me, Alan, Greg hasn't had a lot of time to look at this. Scott hasn't had a lot of time to look at it. Legal hasn't looked at it. A lot of times when the draft ordinance comes to us, those people have already looked at it, and then we're picking apart or changing things, and that's really the really is to if there's some feedback, and Chris, I appreciate you, and you've made some good comments. I think that there's enough comments here that Greg and Paul and soon to be the new city attorney, working city attorney sitting back there wondering, what the heck did I get into? There's enough there that we can work on that to bring back a more polished product to the council so that Zach has something to vote on.
All right. So the request of the council is something for Zach to vote on. Mayor, did you have anything else to add?
I was gonna say, I've got a good feel for where you want to go with this, and I'd be happy to take this and start working on it. I don't know that there's anybody right now that needs to see this. I don't know of anyone who's trying to do something with the lift station at this moment. So, but if they do, whether we're working on this or not, we'll make it clear that this is in the process and they can't do it regardless. But yeah, we'll take it. We'll put something together. If we have questions as we go along, we'll just meet with you separately, or we'll bring it to a work session, no station, and get back with you. But we're ready to move forward. We can take care of this. It won't happen as fast as the others because there are a few other things they're working on, but we will put it in the queue.
Just like the last, this is priority number 1
That's right.
or 2.
That spreadsheet keeps getting bigger, but that's okay. We love working.
This is definitely priority number 2. I'm sorry. That laugh took way too long. Okay, next item, Councilmember Green, but we're gonna mix it up and bring in Councilmember Bloom.
I'm gonna let Councilmember Bloom explain this if she wants to.
Well, this started out as a venting session with me and Councilmember Green, and I have emails from residents who live in various HOAs who HOAs aren't being transparent and they are starting to price gouge on some of these HOA fees. This particular person has almost a $450 monthly HOA fee that's also includes a special assessment, and they're told that their rates are still getting higher. This is a concern because we're trying to help West Jordan be much more affordable. So in the venting session with Kelvin, we wanted to bring this to a work session to figure out if there are avenues in which maybe the city can take on certain things. We can help the certain neighborhoods not be so reliant on HOAs. This is a very, very beginning discussion on potential options and maybe special assessment districts for city mandated amenities. We wanted to kind of start this conversation and see what direction that we can go to one, we obviously can't tell a business how to run their business. HOAs are a business. But is there a way that we as a city can take over certain things or new developments not to go into the HOA business to help residents save money, not feel like they're being taken advantage of, and have transparency?
Yeah, if you all recall, when we were dealing with Welby West, the discussion of HOAs came up with HOAs maintaining detention ponds and play areas, and there were a couple of us that had concerns about those HOAs. So the question is, and this is the preliminary discussion. Before we even spent any staff time, and looking at this, do we have 4 council members that would like to explore the possibility of creating, and we know what the potential costs, that before we even look at potential costs and anything, and the pros and cons, do we want, and expend staff time, do we have 4 council members that want to look at the possibility of having a special assessment district that maintains the detention ponds and the like in Welby West, there was the 15% open space, and to eliminate the HOA and transfer those responsibilities to a special assessment district, that we know that giving a special assessment district, we're more frugal with money and figure out how to do things better and cheaper. And is that something that we want to be in the business in or not?
I'll jump in first. No, and then yes. So no, I would rather not create additional special assessment districts. I think there's too many issues with that. Where it comes to stormwater, however, I would like to see what opportunities we have. Those are a really interesting, tricky beast because they have to have it to support infrastructure. They try and maintain it as green space, but the city needs to be able to get in there and operate some of it. If a group goes in and opens everything wide up, they're not retaining everything, just sending it down. That has huge implications on everything else. But when we need to get equipment in there, are we going to jeopardize some of the landscaping? How does that work? I would almost rather see the city own the storm drain portion of that and give HOAs an opportunity to bring it up to city specs and then transfer that over to the city where we can continue to own, maintain, access those pieces. Folks are already paying into the stormwater fund for that. I would think that part makes sense. Where it comes to other elements like the required green space, a lot of times that green space comes with an incentive. They're incentivized, they go higher density. That's the incentive that they receive, but they have to give certain amenities to the city. I don't want to see the city on the hook to maintain those, even if there is a special assessment district, because then we run into problems with people saying, oh, well, we're not getting what we're paying for. I had this conversation with somebody just 3 weeks ago who lives out in the Highlands, who was saying, hey, we're paying for a higher level of service. I'm not seeing any additional snowplows. I'm only seeing city snowplows that are out here. Well, there's not a clear understanding of what you're getting and what you're not. So I would prefer to see things like that where they need to pay for extra. Somebody was incentivized along the way. The neighborhood, the development had that green space. They should continue to do it. But if it's infrastructure that benefits the entire city or that's required by the entire city, like if it's stormwater, I'd like to see us try and figure out how to do that. There are a lot of lights that have come on. So I'll stop talking and we'll go Councilmember Whitelock, Worth, and Blood.
I struggle with HOAs as well because.
Sorry, my apologies real quick. Just for the record, it looks like Councilmember Pack has left the Zoom. So, sorry,
Okay.
continue.
No worries. Because of that very thing, that to me, an HOA could make you so you could no longer afford to live in the home that you bought. Maybe even you've paid it off, but the HOA just keeps going up. So I struggle with HOAs, but those costs are costs that are going to be borne somewhere. And in the city, I'm not willing to take over HOAs, I guess. I feel like, as Councilmember McConaughey said, many of those developments got extra densities and stuff that maybe is helpful to the city, maybe isn't. But they got those special perks, and the sad thing is, who benefited from the perks? Not the residents, really. The developer did, and the residents then are left paying the HOA. So I wish we could find a way to get away from HOAs. I don't know. Maybe there is a remedy. Yes, I'm looking at you, Mr. Dodd. But I don't know that. No, I'm not saying answer that question. But I don't know that special assessment districts are the way. My feeling has been that we've had our own issues with our special assessment districts trying to balance kind of what Councilmember McConaughey said is how do they feel like they're getting anything extra when it's the same city trucks coming in and doing the services that they see occurring in their neighbor's neighborhood, and they know that neighbor because they asked isn't paying that extra tax, and then it becomes another issue. I don't really know the answer, but I don't know that this is an answer I'm willing to say, yes, let's move forward on.
I really hope Brian Clegg is listening to this. So I only joke about giving Brian more work. You all trying to be serious about it, but no, seriously, I'm sorry. I get what you're saying, but this is too much of a slippery slope to go into that, so I'd be a no.
Well, this is why we're having the discussion, and obviously one of the major other issues of HOAs, they don't care about the water. They water too soon, they water too late, they water too much, and they just pay their landscaping company to do all of that. I don't know what the solution is to protect residents from escalating HOA fees without any transparency. That's what I want to also bring forth to the table, because we want to help our residents be able to afford where they're living and also take care of the city.
Maybe it's something we need to work with our state legislators on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing, and that I do have a question about, would you be willing to look at what Councilmember McConaughey was saying about the detention ponds and some of the maintenance on the detention ponds, because that is a storm drain issue, and if the HOA hasn't maintained the detention pond right, when there's and we've never had a 100-year rainstorm in the last year,
Aside from the 6 that we've had over the last 8.
Yeah. with Lake Constitution, down the street, do we want to take at least a look at the detention pond piece of this to see what we ought to do with detention ponds to make sure that they're maintained?
My thought behind that one came after after the most recent 100-year storm that we had in April, out just west of Romwood Park. The mayor and I were looking at I believe that's a retention basin over there, not a detention, a retention, because you only temporarily retain it, not permanently detain. Anyway, terminology aside, whichever one of the two it was, we drove around and looked at a couple others, and I don't remember if we had the exact number, but it was brought up that there are a couple HOAs that exist only for storm drain in the city, and some of the headaches that our stormwater crews have. Mayor, is your memory better than mine on this
There
one?
are some, I don't think many, I don't know the count, but there are some that is the only reason the HOA exists is for I think it's a detention pond. Thank you.
After school detention, then it gets let go.
Yes. And then it goes out at a speed that's controlled. So that does exist. There are a couple of those. The majority of those, when they have that, they incorporate other things to go with it. They're like their green space or whatever for activities. But yes, they do exist.
The other one that's coming to mind, this was back forever ago. I want to say 10 or 11 years ago, with Mayor Johnson. We also had a neighborhood that had an HOA that existed solely for the purpose of the street, maintaining the street, which, funny enough, the city was receiving Class B road funds for. So we ended up having the neighbors bring it up to standard. Then the city did adopt it, and they were able to dissolve the HOA. I would be very much in favor of looking for things like that. Not every private road should be a public road, but where it's used as public, we're receiving public funds for it, it kind of makes sense. Storm drain, in my mind, that makes sense as well. That would be where I would want to look to see what we can do, but I'd be adverse to the special assessment district for it. That's my way more than 2 cents, at least 3/4 worth there.
I think the larger question is it the best practice to be requiring all these amenities in developments? Why doesn't the city go back to building parks and let the people who live near them enjoy them, and instead of requiring, developers and HOAs to put in tot lots and benches and paths and things,
If they build with the specs that are already provided with the current zoning, they don't have to do any of those. It's when they say, you know what, we want to get
special,
extra, we want extra units in here.
But
The-
they only do it because we allow it.
Zach, you're correct. The only two zones right now that require those amenities are the PRD and the PC. And it sounds like we
we
were
used to
talking
do it.
about that earlier today anyway, and maybe that, as we look at PRD and PC, maybe the idea is we look at and I'm gonna say go back to that, but maybe we look at the goal of the density of PRDs and PCs, and maybe those amenities in PRDs and PCs should go away. That's not a bad discussion to have, and I think I'm with you. Maybe the bigger discussion is just to eliminate those amenities.
So, Councilmember Green, Councilmember Bloom, where would you like this particular discussion to go on the special assessment districts for city mandated amenities?
I like what you brought up and looking into the wastewater and
Stormwater.
stormwater. I think that'd be wise to look at. And I also like the idea of potentially looking at the PRD and PCs, adding on to the discussion the first of the meeting.
Would you be willing to, on on the PRD and PC, to look at the amenities piece of that and the density buy-ups? to have the discussion about potentially eliminating those or changing those?
I think that's a great discussion to have with the planning commission and get together in a joint session if we're gonna do another one of those and have that chat. I think it's a good discussion to have. Why did we start walking down this road, and is it really where we want to end up?
I'm happy to entertain the detention and retention pond discussion and find out what's, even as far as asking staff to, if they could ascertain for us how, you know, what does that look like? How many, is there one, is there 20? And then, you know, if it's really an issue for staff, the way they're maintained and stuff, then it may be wise for us to say that's something maybe we should be doing. I'm not sure that will help the ultimate goal here, though, because the ultimate goal here is, the issue is HOAs can sometimes run amok, and I don't know, you know, if they're ran well and you can get on the board, great, but I know sometimes that's a little tricky.
And I'm okay with at least the first step that, I mean, some of this was to deal with detention ponds. If the result of this is just to take a look at the detention ponds, and those issues, let's start there. And then maybe there's a way we can have in the future, a more holistic discussion on HOAs, you know, and you know, we're already looking at Title 13 and 14 for PRD and PC. We can talk about that eventually, and talk about eliminating the required amenities that force an HOA, and then that's where we, you know, and maybe this is just a bifurcated step, and the first step is to look at detention ponds, and I'm okay with what the council, where the council wants to go with this. It's clear that the idea of a special assessment district would be dead, but I think we can generate from that, maybe looking at the detention pond, and I'm okay with taking whatever initial steps we are to look at this, so that, you know, the long-term goal may be to eliminate some of these HOAs that the only reason they exist is to have a detention pond in their neighborhood. And some of the detention ponds are just all rocks, but you don't know if they're maintained.
Mayor Burton, would you care to chime in? I do see your lights.
Yes, thank you. So what I hear you saying is the HOA is a total different discussion than the detention ponds. So I'm going to take the detention ponds, take that, work that out, bring that back. I'm not going to do the HOA thing, with the exception of the HOAs that have only exist for the detention pond. And if you're good with that, we'll move forward that way.
I'm looking for, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, not 5 heads nod, and a couple thumbs up.
Thank you.
Go that route. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else for that item, we can move on to, surprise, surprise, this one has Councilmember Green's name attached to it, but also Councilmember Whitelock and Councilmember Worthen. This is the conversation about the Youth Council.
What you had in your packet was the draft. So we are really close. I provided you a couple of reports beforehand. We are really close in getting the West Jordan Youth Council up and running again. The last line on this will probably not work, but when we do the budget amendment, if we have it in April, we'll be okay. What we want to be able to do is get the council's feedback on the policies and procedures guide for the youth council. It's it's fairly simple. It was based on a neighbor to one of our bordering neighbor cities. They have a really weird border with us, but we share a golf course with them. So we won't mention Sandy. We took the policies and procedures from Sandy, modified a few things. What we're looking at is that if there's anything to be changed, and then also, do a budget amendment, because we just decided to spend all the money out of the contingency, fund, to do about to use about $2,500 for this, and it probably won't be that much this fiscal year. What we want to do is get the youth council up and running, have the applications taken. If you looked at the policies and procedures guide, the program year runs from June 1st through May 31st. It works really well to bring the kids in to start in June, so that their first service project would be tied to Western Stampede, and then they would have then the end of August we would have the formal organizing meeting with the high school students. So what we want to do is there any feedback on this procedures guide that we can, or can we move this forward to next meeting as a business item, so we can proceed with getting the application's also in your packet, that this would get the application, so we can get the applications posted on Facebook and the other social media, and get it distributed to the 3 high schools yes, there are 3 high schools in the city. We will not forget one of them. And we can distribute the applications to 3 high schools in the city and get the youth council moving again.
Councilmember Jacob.
Help me understand what a youth council does, because I'm reading through the manual that you put together here, and it's, attend meetings, dress appropriately, code of ethics, stuff like that. I get that. Here's your officers and things. But what do? What are they meeting to talk about? What are they? I've heard of these before, but I've never really sat and talked to any of them, so I don't know what they do. What do they talk about?
So part of it is a service organization. Part of it is that they serve the city, or they can serve other entities in the city. The other is to help them learn more about government. So they can have mock things, or they're encouraged to come and attend our meetings. The purpose is to get them involved in government, and so that they can see what government actually does. And then they also can attend legislature. They have their whole day on the Hill. So it's just another opportunity for youth in our community to join an organization where they can come together and learn and enjoy each other's company and serve.
I was on youth council. We worked with the city attorneys and did things with the city. We even worked on doing punishments for kids our age who break the law. We worked with our city council, attended meetings. We had our own leadership trainings. We did weekend leadership retreats. We worked up at the legislations, met with all of our reps. I actually did a day with our legislator to learn everything in and outs of the days. And then that's actually when I learned all of Robert's rules. And so it was really actually a valuable thing when I was on youth council.
And we hope that they become future council members. That's actually one of the goals, is to get kids involved in city government to the point where they could be where they'd want to be involved in city government as adults and run for council and those kind of volunteer for other committees and do those kind of things.
Council, I ran the youth council in Draper, and Councilmember Bloom, you're exactly right. That's exactly what we did. We ran a youth court. We ran a lot of service projects for the events. We did meet the candidate night for the elections, and then they had their own council meetings and ran Robert's rules. So it was very valuable. We had about 30 youth that attended youth council on a regular basis. It was very beneficial to teaching them about government and how things are run.
So
Well, if we're putting Denise in charge, I
No,
definitely think we should.
all in favor?
We can't
I
direct.
can veto
Hey,
that one.
It seems to me that Councilmember Jacob specifically mentioned that staff cannot be directed to do something by this
That's
council.
right, and I was stopping that one before I
I'd
got
be
any
happy
further.
to assist in helping you get off the ground, but it was very rewarding. It was a good program, and I actually had Mayor Walker's daughter in my program.
Well, and I would anticipate that, key staff members would come in and give, train and talks and, lots of things that we can do to help build the skills of the youth of the high school youth of West Jordan. Did that help, Councilmember Jacob?
So again, I appreciate having the document here to kind of get an idea of what you're thinking. I like the idea, although I would personally prefer not to pass a resolution, pass a resolution supporting the particular policy and procedures booklet that's attached. I'd like to make sure that there's some flexibility. So in its inception, it's really easy to make adjustments where needed. But I think it's a really good starting point. The other thing that I would suggest is, I'm not sure what others look like, but I think about opening up the ages just a little bit. It's just 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It says high school students, but it's limited to 10th, 11th, and 12th. I would probably open that up, so if there are some 9th graders that are interested, they could do that. I would probably.
I said that first. I'm just
What-
saying, it's already been brought up, but I was ignored.
What we tried to do was we don't know how many students are going to apply for this. And what we don't want to do is have an unmanageable group. So we were trying to keep this to a maximum of 30. And so using the numbers 10th, 11th, and 12th, we thought we could get someplace around 15 to 30. That was the thought process.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the idea of leaving some flexibility in the document rather than have it adopted by resolution, having to come back and re-adopt it anytime modifications are made. Sorry, it looks like Councilmember Worthen hasn't weighed in yet, has she? Did you want to say something?
No, I didn't say a word, apparently. So I did some of this stuff back in elementary school with some kids, and they were in 6th grade, and I did bring up the fact that we should bring it to lower grades because you know what? You want some of those middle school kids to say they do want to do it in high school. So I didn't want to close the door to just high school, and the fact that, some schools are actually rolling 9th grade back, apparently, which it's where it belongs. So I would like to open it up to some younger grades, just to be able to have that opportunity for kids. I don't think you're going to have a lot of people banging down the door to do this. Unfortunately, I wish that was the case. So opening it up, you might actually be able to fill those spots.
And I think there might also be an opportunity for those that are homeschooled. I'd want to be careful about focusing too much just on high school, but anybody in
there are kids that are homeschooled that we would hopefully the high school age. We were also honestly looking at a level of maturity.
Well, that would rule me out.
I'm happy. In my mind, we kept it to high schools just because to start it, that decreases the number of schools we need to go to and promote it and get it going. So for me, that was the objective, is just like fewer schools to have to try and promote through. But I am not opposed to having 9th graders join. I think that's just fine.
So I'm not hearing any voices in opposition. So I assume
we can change it to 9th grade and just change the document to not. We can change the document to 9th grade. That's easy.
I'll just weigh in and say that I agree with codifying the rule book. I'd rather leave that fluctuatable. But other than that, I think we're good. Yeah, that's a word, fluctuatable.
okay.
Like bajillion.
Yeah, most cities by resolution adopt some sort of policies and procedures. If you don't want to do that, fine. we'll pass a resolution that readopts the West Jordan Youth Council next week and we can be okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see some flexibility, especially where we've heard snippets of how much, you've heard snippets of how much some of these other youth councils have done. And in my mind, I'm thinking staff time, staff time, staff time, staff time. I'd like to make sure we have all the flexibility that we need to give things the best possible chance. That's
There's no just so you know, there's no mayor staff time on this. This is the city council. This is the city council, and so it will be left up to. And if you notice in the book, it's left up to the council liaison and a potential volunteer youth advisor, and we'll advertise and see if there is someone in the city that wants to help as a volunteer with that. That's part of the reason for the resolution. If you want us to if you want me to reword the resolution, we can do that. We just wanted to be able to pass the resolution next week as a business item, so that we can move forward with the applications.
okay. Is there anything else that's needed for this one?
So let me hear what you said. You want to take the policies and procedures out of the resolution. Are you okay with the and then you know what, we'll deal with Denise once we pass the resolution, we'll deal with a budget amendment in April. We'll just deal with the budget amendment as part of that in April, because we'll need $1,500, $2,000 to get it started with some t-shirts per June. So if that's okay with the council, we'll just clean up the resolution. We'll get Denise to do a budget resolution in April, and we'll go from there.
And we'll change the,
to 9th grade.
I don't think the grade is even called out in the.
It's not in the resolution. It's in the policies.
Yeah,
but we'll
it's
change that.
in the policies, but I would anticipate the policies would likely modify over time. Former council member Anderson.
Thank you. I just want a little bit of clarification. The code already allows the creation of a youth council. I believe the resolution was to adopt policy and procedures. So do we need to even do a resolution next week if the code already allows the council to do that and you don't want to do a resolution, so you have flexibility with what's in the mail? I would like a little more guidance.
Let's ask the city attorney.
While he's bringing up his mic, in my mind, since it's already out there, I think we've got enough nods from the council to where, in theory, council office could send out applications tomorrow, not needing anything legislative. But Mr. Dodd.
Yeah, if the code already allows the creation of it, I don't think you'd need to do that. And if you're just trying to pass the policies and procedures, that can be done after they are completed.
Or not codify them at all, so.
Yeah.
So do we have 4 council members that'll agree to a budget amendment for $2,000 for a budget amendment for t-shirts, and those looks like we do.
We have 6.
Okay. So we won't do a resolution, and we'll just modify the policies and procedures, and then we'll just move forward.
And those applications will go out tomorrow?
No.
Council Director Anderson, this is obviously priority number 1.
I've got 17 priority ones, but
Mayor, at least this is not your task and your staff's task.
we will work on getting that application done as quickly as possible.
Alan, the application's done. It's part of the packet.
Yep, it's in there.
It's in
Okay,
there.
I'm just gonna have legal just look it over, make sure we have the information we need. Thank you.
Yep, the application's done, and so yeah, we can have legal look over it.
So, in all seriousness, though, I do have questions on that application. I do think it would be good for legal to look at it because record privacy has been something that's come up in the past where the city has records. Like here, we're asking for the student's current GPA. I can share concerns about that particular. Everything else looks fine to me, but the current GPA had a little red flag from past experience.
That's why tomorrow I will talk with legal and I'll also talk with risk.
Beautiful. All right. Anything else needed on this one from those who brought it?
I just want to make sure that we send it to our charter schools as well as our district schools, please.
Yep, I already have that.
Thank you.
All right, administrative items. I've got a couple items, but Mr. Anderson, we'll start with yours.
The only one I have, and the council asked to bring this back, is Mr. Astle, who's the public service director, had made a request of me to ask the council their desire to participate in the parade on July 4th. The options are the trailer, which is what we used last year. He would need some time between now and then to create the trailer. Golf carts are an option. The golf carts have a cost to those. Those are not city golf carts. The other option is a fire truck, but it would require multiple fire trucks to house, have all of you on them, and that would have a cost as well for the drivers, because y'all can't drive a fire truck, or shouldn't. So I just need to know what the majority of you are willing to be on the trailer. Yep, I see your sign with money, and I think the trailer would be the least expensive. Golf carts were a couple $1,000 if I remember.
I want the least expensive.
Least expensive.
And the fire trucks, you'll if all of you are on fire trucks, then it's just the employee that's driving the trucks.
I'll say what I said last year and the year before that and the year before that. I attended Provo's 4th of July parade last year. Their city council is in donated cars from local dealerships. You put a sign on the side that says car provided by Larry H. Miller Subaru, and you have a convertible, and the council's guys are sitting in that, and there's 7 cars for 7 council members.
That's an option too.
And it's pretty cool. I'm just saying, it's pretty cool. And they're donated. They get some advertising. City council gets something to ride in that doesn't look like a horse should be pulling.
I can check with our local dealer.
So first
Truck
question I
ranch would
have,
be- truck
are we
ranch would be
doing just council members or council members and family?
I think that's up to you to decide.
So,
It's if you bring your families, that change. I mean,
I will have lots of family members if I get my. I don't know who, but I'll make them up.
so you just need to let me know what you want us to do.
so I guess raise of hands, who would like to involve families as opposed to just council members? I only see
My
two.
family will not. My family won't do it anyway, so it's irrelevant.
Your microphone. Can you turn your microphones on for those who might?
We had trailers on the families. We had families on the trailer.
Yeah, we had families
So-
with us last year.
As long as they fit, yeah.
I can't answer that right now because my family's in a different position than maybe yours because mine are grown. So maybe they'll be here, maybe they won't.
I can tell you for me personally, golf carts out, A, expense, B, our little kids. So all 5 of our kids are different places on the autism spectrum. So even on the trailer, I worry about them. I really like being able to have them confined in a vehicle like the fire truck. That worked out well for me. How do you guys want to do stuff? Do you want to do?
So I would say we either do the trailer together, or if we get like Zach's idea, because both of those would be either nothing or really cheap. I don't want to do anything that's going to be expensive. We can't all get on the fire truck, although that would be hilarious to try to see us hanging from the ladders and stuff, but that's not going to be safe. So I would say not golf carts because it's too expensive.
So is it a requirement then that we all be together?
Yes, you have to sit right next to me. It's not an option.
There ought to be some sort of semblance that we're one body.
I don't think we all have to be together, but if we're all in order, as far as the city presentation goes. I've been saying it for years,
I-
and people have been.
I feel it necessary to say that Miss Barker at one time did arrange for vehicles for us, trucks, I believe. Do you remember, Mayor? I know she did, and we, no, and we said no. Yes,
There was an
Yeah.
idea for some trucks,
she
and
had
there
it.
was actually something. I'm going to throw
So,
our members of the Utah Bar under the bus, or the trailer, or fire truck, or whatever. But there was a concern about city council members in trucks donated by the Western Stampede sponsor, and I think that it was like, are we endorsing a commercial enterprise? I think that
is that the issue? I
I
don't
would-
remember.
in
I
the
just
back of
remember
my
she had
mind-
arranged it, and for whatever
in the
reason it
back
didn't
of my
work.
mind, that seems like that was the concern. Do you remember that, Alan?
Um,
That when Tawny arranged for the trucks, there was a concern about sponsorship and
Mayor,
council members.
do we have extended cab trucks, right? So couldn't we have an extended cab truck pull the trailer, and then Councilmember McConaughey and his boys could be in the truck, and the rest of us could be on the trailer? Would that maybe work?
As long as my kids are locked up somewhere.
They're not extended cabs, actually club cabs. Extended
Club
cab is just.
Okay.
But yes, is the answer.
Could we do that
The answer is yes.
with that?
That- that- We could also potentially talk to the Bowler family. They've got, except they're going to be using their truck for royalty, I'm guessing. Unless,
I think a rental vehicle would be less than $50, so I think we could get
well,
a donated rental vehicle.
the bowlers help out frequently with the rodeo, but they've also got the large black truck that actually has like 6 doors on it, so it's a double crew cab.
Right. I think it was Dodge, because they're the ones that are sponsors, and I think they were going to provide vehicles for you to ride in. As I recall, that's what Tawny was arranging originally. But I don't know what the reason was why it didn't happen. But if it was due to the value, in my mind, I'm thinking that would be less than a $50 value to rent a vehicle for 2 hours. But
Well, it's not like it's a gift. It's not like it's.
no,
you
it's
know
not
what
a
I mean?
gift. It's just
It's-
riding down the road. That is.
It doesn't. It doesn't
And
matter.
it would say the dealer's name on the side.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah. So they're getting something out of it. We get a ride. It's.
All right, it seems like we have a pretty good consensus on direction, but still need to get some details worked out. But those details would be the responsibility for those details will be assumed by Mr. Anderson.
That is correct.
Is that fair?
And
All right.
was that priority number 1 or 2?
Oh, obviously 1.
1. Okay.
Sewer is the only thing that's number 2 for obvious reasons.
And that's
Everything
'cause
else is
it's
priority
crappy.
1. The last, anything else on this one before I hit my administrative items?
No, but can I, it's not really a July thing, but can I ask a question? I've only heard from one of you about a water tank tour next week.
Yeah,
You'll send your reply. I think Friday would be best.
Friday works better for me.
I didn't hear back from you on my response to
Yes,
you. So,
you're the one who responded, and I will get that to you as soon as I hear back.
okay.
when did the water tour thing get sent out?
It was yesterday or Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, I ain't falling for that again after what happened last time.
No,
Literally
And,
falling.
and this tank, they haven't put all the walls up, so you'll just be able to walk into the tank. The roof's not on. It'll be much easier than trying to do the last one.
I would recommend, I mean, granted, this is council meeting and the planning commission falls to the mayor, not to the city council. But I know there are members of the planning commission and also design review committee that have been engaged in the development process of the city that would very much appreciate an invitation to see some of our infrastructure in construction.
I think they'd be thankful to come see it.
I should have known better than to open that up for you. I apologize to the council.
That's all I have. I'll
Skip.
plan on Friday.
Yeah. Whenever you do it, just let me know when you do it for, and I'll let you know if I can come.
Okay. I've already spoken with everybody here on the council to give everyone a heads up, but next week on Thursday is the recognition dinner for the general plan committee. We talked about making sure we recognize what they've done. We've got a venue that's been arranged for dinner for them and a significant other. We'd like the council to be there. Council can bring a significant other as well. And then we've also asked the planning commission if they'd like to come, and a significant other for them too. We'll have the recognition dinner, and then as part of that, we will let the general plan committee share what they feel are the most important contributions that they have made to the general plan. They can highlight things that they really want to emphasize to the city council, and they can also have an opportunity to make an ask of the city council, like, council, I would like to see you do X, Y, or Z. We'll also give the planning commission, who's had a lot of time to work with this plan, an opportunity to share their thoughts directly with the council. We don't anticipate the council doing anything other than enjoying a meal and exchanging pleasantries with the folks that are there, and then just listening as they share their thoughts on the general plan. We will come back then on Thursday, April 13th, and then start working as a council through those through the general plan document to make the changes and modifications that that we need to, since ultimately we do own that. So because we want it to be a little more than a social gathering, the dinner, the thank you dinner on the 23rd, will be noticed as a committee of the whole. But again, it's mostly just us listening. We're not expected to do too much other than hear the folks who have put much time and effort into that. Our work will really take place on April 13th.
5 or 6?
The time that was placed originally was a placeholder. Mr. Anderson will be sending out details, unless he delegates it to Cassidy, to give the location and the exact time, and also dress. It might be like Sunday best.
I vote that we dress, yes. I think we should dress. Clothing would be good.
Not clothing optional. We don't do that in Utah.
Fair enough. Any questions on that one? I know I've chatted with everybody. It should be on the radar. Details will be forthcoming shortly, but wanted to make sure it was brought up here. All right. Anything else that needs to be brought up as part of administrative items?
At 5, 6, somewhere in there, right?
Probably closer to 6, I would imagine.
Okay, all right.
We are intentionally choosing a venue that does not allow us to stay till midnight. So I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Green, second by Vice Chair Bloom, third by Councilmember Whitelock. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.